afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Oasis Solutions today for our monthly webinar. And this month, we're going to be covering Sage 100 and Sage 100 Cloud, the Business Insights Reporter and Explorer module within Sage 100. During the presentation, your phone lines will be muted, but you do have the ability to ask questions using the question feature throughout the presentation. So please feel free to enter any questions that you have. I will tell you that we are anticipating a high volume of questions today. So if that is the case, what we will be doing is actually listing out all of the individual questions that are received as well as our responses, and then we will follow up after the presentation and send a copy of the questions with answers to all of the attendees. So again, please feel free to ask any questions. And today's presentation is actually going to be presented by Patrick Johnson. He's our project facilitator here at Oasis. And Pat, are you on the line?
I sure am.
Okay. Well, if you're ready, I will turn the presentation over to you and change to your screen.
Great, thank you.
And I'll let you go ahead and start, and then I'll monitor the question board.
Great, thank you so much. Just need to make sure everybody can see my screen appropriately. And which screen? There we go. Let's see. I think everybody can see my screen now. Thank you all for joining us today for this overview of Business Insights. I'll log into the system really quickly here. And there we go. And up came the dashboard. Awesome. So thank you all for joining again. As an overview, Business Insights is a suite of tools native inside of Sage 100 that helps to streamline access and visibility to information inside of Sage 100. These tools consist of dashboards, as you're seeing right here on my screen. Also, reporting, so the reporter functionality. And finally, the Explorer functionality, which I'll spend most of my time on today. So we're going to take a higher level overview of the dashboards and reporter and focus a little bit more on the Explorer functionality. We can access the Business Insights tools from the Business Insights folder inside of Sage 100, and so I'm highlighting that right here. And for those on earlier versions of Sage 100, we're using the newish standard interface, so that may look a little bit new to some folks who are on older versions. I believe 2017 and prior to 2017, you may be on the classic view, and the same folder exists there with the same relatively like functionality there. Today we'll use the MFG sample company, which you see at the bottom, and I'm logged in as my main kind of administrative user. So let's start with dashboard and the dashboard options here at the top. When I click on Business Insights, I see the three options I just mentioned, and I see dashboard at the top. And you saw the dashboard that I have programmed at the moment for my user that just jumped up as soon as I logged into the system. The dashboard functionality allows you to select and present user-relevant preset dashboards. Procurement users, for instance, might have a dashboard related to their key metrics, like NAR might as well, and executives in the organization could too. In this particular case, I've got the OCS user logged in, and that's more of a customer-related person that's interested in customer information, or a sales manager, for instance. If I logged in as the Pat user, if I do that really quick, we'll close this, and change my user to Pat, and refresh the dashboard, I would see more procurement or vendor-related data, or dashboard information. If I scroll down here, you can see the different functionalities I'm able to expose via the dashboard setup. Get this out of the way here. Shrink 1 second. Great. And And so these are variable based on the kind of person that's logging into the system, and we can set them up by user, and we'll see that shortly. And finally, I could log in as the exec user. I have a user set up here called exec, and refresh the dash and see executive level, like maybe a balance sheet or balance sheet related information. Some of these have rollover, mouse over functionalities where you can see relevant data to the visual that you have there, the graph that's presented. We'll go into a little bit more of that later on. If I mouse over some of the stuff over here in the profitability ratios, I see additional data that I might not know about just by looking at the image. So that's available in any and all of these dashboard configurations, and we'll walk through that in just a second. The dashboards do require some minor system setup, and you would go through that setup in the options here. We won't do that today, but it's not a big deal to do that. And then from there, it's basically maintenance, dashboard maintenance wizard driven. So I could go through real quick. I don't mind to go through and just show how that works really quickly, how we would set up a dashboard for somebody. If I went in and said next into the wizard here, I could choose the user for which was going to create a dashboard. If I hit the finder here, I see all the existing user dashboards set up. And then if I hit the flashlight, I see all the existing users. So it's possible that all users are not set up with a dashboard. In this case, I'll grab the Pam user and walk through the wizard for Pam. Pam does not have, I won't save this, but Pam does not have a dashboard set up for her really at this point. So we're setting her up a new dashboard. I can allow the actual user to modify their dashboard. There are minor modifications that a user can make on their dashboard. We'll see that in just a second. You can also set up the way the system refreshes the dashboard, as this information we would want to be as dynamic as possible and as timely as possible. So you would set the refresh rate applicably to your business. If I hit next here, I then get the opportunity to see all of the available dashboard views. We'll talk about views a little bit later on when we get into the Explorer functionality, but a dashboard view here are these visual representations of aggregated data, basically metrics, and Sage has put together some pretty thoughtful ones here. And in Pam's case, maybe she's most interested in sales, or how about receivables aging? Let's just say that. I can add these different pieces to her dashboard view. Maybe she wants sales by division as well. And I can move them up or down so that they show up in a certain order on her dashboard when it populates. Note also that I have the ability to, when there says yes here under the options, that there are additional options about that given dashboard. And it might be a number of detail lines or graph segmenting, but we have the ability to modify that kind of thing. So if I grab those two and hit finish, I'm not going to, because I want to keep Pam without a dashboard and show how that might work. But if I were to hit OK or finish here, then we could log in as Pam and see that dashboard. So that's how the wizard works, and it's pretty easy to do. I mean, I set up exec, Pat, and OCS pretty quickly, those users. As I said earlier in the setup, I have the ability to, because I gave the exec user the ability to modify their page, you can see this hyperlink in the upper right-hand corner, modify this page. And if I hit that button, it sends me right into the wizard. And where the system will allow me to make modifications, it shows me that. You can't change everything. There's some security related to that, but you can see here that it's already hard coded to the exec dashboard because I'm logged in as exec. And then I can come in and I could take away certain visual elements of it. If there were options here, I could change the options, or I could change the order. So maybe I wanted profit and loss ratios to show up at the top, and then hit next and finish and close that and refresh the dashboard. And now I have profitability ratios at the top. So there is the ability to kind of gently modify the visuals and where they show. on your dashboard. And so that's the way that works. I would mention that there are hyperlinks and other clickable elements to these dashboards as you work through them. Like for instance, if I look at the balance sheet details here, I could click on the balance sheet summary button and it would take me to a summary version. And then I could hit balance sheet details and it would take me back, or I could go back and back again to the beginning. So there's navigation inside the dashboard as well. Additionally, there are places you can scroll through and actually generate a report from. So if I, for instance, grab the cash, click cash, it would take its time and generate a report on my other screen, which I'm pulling across right now. And so that's giving me basically a trial balance by period of, or some transactions I can't see here. Detailed postings, that's right, for by the accounts that are of the cash type. So the accounts that summarize this section of the balance sheet would be in detail there. And you can do that all over the place here. Every time that the system turns into a pointing finger there, you could actually run a report from there. So that's pretty nice, an easy way to get to information that you're looking for. And it's available in most, if not all, of the dashboards that are available to you. It's also possible to present a default dashboard to users that don't have a specific dash set up for them. So recall a moment ago, I neglected to finish Pam's dashboard. Well, because Pam does not have a dashboard set up for her, she automatically gets the default dashboard. So briefly, if I go back into dashboard maintenance again and choose the default user dashboard and build the default user dashboard, everyone that doesn't have a dashboard assigned to them custom would see the default dashboard show up. So if there were just general company metrics that you wanted to reveal there, maybe you publish the income statement each month to everybody in the company, for instance. You could do that kind of thing using the applicable dashboard, and that would get assigned to the default user, who then populates for all users, again, that does not have a custom dashboard set up for them. It's also possible to, through setup and some configuration, to automate the refresh of the dashboards according to your preferences. As I said earlier, this is supposed to be timely and relevant data, so it's important to set up the refreshing to your taste. Overall, fairly simple to use and usable data elements that populate quickly upon login. We're kind of limited by the preset dashboards, but the dashboards are designed well, in my opinion, and enough to be useful. So I wanted to just point out maybe a value proposition about this functionality. I think it can be particularly valuable to users that require quick, high-level, and summarized views of the business. And maybe it's users that have limited access, that don't log in much, because a lot of this information, a controller or somebody who is, someone who is in the system a lot may have access to in other ways. So I could see how this would be useful for an executive or somebody, a sales manager, who just wanted to log in and see what was happening against certain information. So that's kind of the value area for this particular functionality. Low risk setup, low energy setup, very easy to set up, and potentially high reward in terms of data. So that's how that works. That's the dashboard. So moving on then, let's pivot to the reporter functionality. And that's the second one down here. Basically, this is a crystal report wizard. And those of you who know me out there may have attended one of my Crystal Reports classes. This is a really interesting way to kind of get into Crystal Reports without having to do a lot of training. If you can understand how to work through a wizard, then this is a good way to get into it. We can create beginner to intermediate level Crystal Reports, more on the beginner side, using the wizard setup that basically allows you to choose and modify views and fields, group and filter data, and secure access to the right kinds of people in the organization. So you could basically build a report and make sure that people assigned to a certain role were able to see that report. So what I'll do here quickly is click on the Business Insights Reporter, and it's opening on the other screen as well. So I'll scroll that over here, and I'll actually create a simple vendor list report using the report wizard. So if I hit next here, I could call it just vendor list. Let's just call it vendor list. And then this functionality, so that's the report description. And then this functionality here, add this report to the custom reports menu of the selected module. That will actually populate a link to this report in the applicable module. So the vendor list you would think would be found in, guess what, in the AP module custom reports menu, which we'll see in a little while. But you could put it anywhere you wanted. For our purposes, though, it makes sense to put it in AP. And so if I were to scroll down to AP over here on the left side and click on the custom reports menu, we would see that, and we will a little bit later on. So I hit next. And the first question it asks me is, what would I like the orientation of the report to be? And for this purpose, we'll just choose landscape. It's a list, and there's going to be a bunch of data elements going horizontally, so I would like to have a decent enough amount of real estate left to right. So I choose landscape. And then it's giving me views to choose from. We'll learn a little bit more about views a little bit later on, but a view basically is we're choosing the data pool from which to choose in order to create our vendor list report. And if I scroll down through the views here, I end up down, it's all in alphabetical order, so I end up at the vendor information view. And you can see here there are many, many other views, and they're related to different modules. So the issue here is that you choose one of these, and it's basically reading data from the different tables in and of that module. There can be related data in other modules just because of the way Sage 100 is set up in the back end, in the database, at the database level. But it does, basically, this would give you, if you found the right table here, chances are you're going to have the information you need to create your report. For vendor lists, good enough. Vendor information is what we're going to take. So I grab vendor info and click next. Oops, valid view. We want the vendor view and vendor information. And then I get into basically the wizard here where I choose the fields that I want to see in my report. And that's very simple to do here. So I would think that anybody printing a vendor listing would want to see the vendor number, the vendor name, maybe some address information here. Maybe we're putting together a listing for a mailing or Christmas cards or holiday cards or whatever. And so we just grab a couple data elements here and maybe the primary contact and a phone number. And so some things to realize about this particular screen, just as an overview, is that we can add new fields, we can add links. So we can link other tables into this view to kind of bring in related data. I'm not going to go into a lot of that today, but it's worth playing with that. If you are adventurous, click on Add New Field and Add Links, and you'll find other ways to kind of bring in related data. On the right side here, once I clicked on these, they got populated into the selected field area, and we get to know a little bit about the data element and how it exists in the database. And this is important because a given record inside of the vendor list has a certain, in the database for vendor, the system holds a certain amount of space open for that record. So in the width here, you can tell the number of characters that Sage holds in that record for that particular data element. And so for our purposes today, I'm going to just leave these alone. What's going to happen here is that the system will basically covet the amount of space in the report that the database has for that report. So in this case, vendor name has 50 spaces available in it. So we could put a 50-space vendor name into Sage 100, and this crystal report will try to reveal that in its entirety, and it will hold 50 spaces open. I have the ability to modify that. I can come in here and change the number of spaces, and now you're going to see, once I print this report out and we see, the report will be blown out because there's not enough horizontal real estate to accommodate all of these characters. Even if our vendor number or vendor name doesn't take 50 characters, maybe it takes 10 characters. we could trim that down to 10 characters and kind of fit more information on the same line. So if I hit next, I can sort by vendor name. So that would be a sort mechanism here where I could sort information on the report. So it's going to sort by vendor name. And then I can add some groupings here. If there was related data in the selected fields, I could group them and get maybe some subtotals going and stuff like that. In this case, I'll hit auto, and that kind of puts them all in one group as a kind of a list report. And then you could put some filters on it and require, if you click runtime, it gives you the ability to actually modify the filter before it generates the report. I'm going to leave that blank. I just wanted to bring out all records in the vendor table. There are some other formatting things here I'm going to not talk about at this point and just hit next. Similarly here, you can chain this report to another report if required. And this is just irrelevant to what we're trying to get to today. I'm just trying to get to the end of this report, and then I can assign available roles to it. This is what I was speaking about earlier when I said the ability to secure the report, only let certain people with the right role have access to that report. And so if I hit finish here, I can run this report. And I get like a standard Sage Crystal print report dialog here. And of course, it printed on my other screen. So here we are. And what we're looking at here are the huge spaces that are held open for each data element. If I had slimmed down the character count in each one of those records, we could have gotten more information on a single line. But you can see how it's dumped out the vendors, and it's actually 2 lines deep for every data element that we chose. Chances are, if we changed the airport's service travel to 20 characters instead of 50, it would have allowed more records to show up here. That's how simple it is to get a basic list report out of the system. What else did I want to say about that? And so basically, that report is now created, and we get to go back to the vendor to the report's listing. So that's what we're looking at here. That's the Business Insights reporter listing, and that would hold all of the custom reports that we've built here inside of Business Insights. I have the option to create a new report. I could highlight the one we just built and go back and change it or copy it, or I could access it directly. If I have Crystal Reports on my machine, I could open it directly in Crystal Reports and run it from there. Some folks will find it interesting to run a report or build a report in Business Insights Reporter using the wizard, and then open it in Crystal afterwards and make fine-tuned changes. So that's all I really wanted to show here, is just the ability to play around. And I would encourage everyone listening, if you have this access to it, start to play with these reports and see what you can build with it, and let us know if we can help you. So I'll hit cancel here and close out of that. We can export reports and import reports the same way into this. But if I go down to, as I mentioned earlier, go down to AP, down to the custom reports panel, you can there see my vendor list is sitting there, and I can run it from there if I wanted to. And I get the same print dialog I had earlier. Recall that was a setting in the setup in the wizard. So that's how that works. So finally, I wanted to mention value. I'm trying to kind of illustrate a little bit of value at the end of each one of these to kind of get you thinking about how it might work into your business. As I kind of alluded to earlier, the reporting functionality might be useful to folks that aren't really interested in learning Crystal Reports per se, who want to begin to play around with Crystal Reports and learn a basic functionality of Crystal. Of course, a shameless plug, we do offer Crystal Reports training for those who get hooked using the wizard, or it may be that you are just perfectly happy with the wizard, and that's totally fine. But generally, it's for folks who want to create quick and simple reports inside the framework of the wizard, and it's kind of easy to access and understand. It has its limitations for sure, And at some point, I think the natural progression is for users to want to learn Crystal Reports itself, but it's still really useful for the right kind of user. So keep that in mind. You'll run into roadblocks if you try to get too creative with it, though. So let me pivot now to finally to the Explorer section. So Explorer. Explorer in the Business Insights suite here is basically an alternative and really powerful way to look at, view, slice and dice your business's data inside of Sage 100. A new way, or not new, it's been around for a while, but it's kind of an interesting variation on how to access the data. It's basically built on a number of various pre-built views of related data. So the first question typically is, what is a view? And a view basically is a presentation or a collection of related data from multiple tables and locations into one virtual table that can be kind of queried and reported against. So if we were to present this data like we were a couple minutes ago in a Crystal report from scratch, we'd have to understand how tables relate to each other inside of Sage. For instance, invoice header versus invoice details. Those are two different tables inside of Sage 100's data set, and they relate to different areas of data, invoice data entry. But if we built something like this inside of Crystal, we'd have to understand that relationship and how to link those tables together manually. But Business Insights Explorer, Sage has kind of established this linkage already in the background with these pre-established views. So there's access to all kinds of different information here. If we scroll down this long list of Explorer views, there are views about customers here. There are views about accounts, general ledger, RMA. It even goes down to the bottom for bills of material, so you can look at bills of material information, sales orders. And these are all fully developed and linked behind the scenes. And so when you open one of these, you have the ability to see the record that you're initially looking at. So if we went into the customer view, which we will in just a minute, you'd see the customer and many of the other data elements immediately related to customers. So another interesting point about that is that they're all modifiable. So I can add fields to the view. I can, in some cases, I can see UDF information from inside. It's filterable. It's savable, so I can build a big query and then save it for future use when I log in again. I want to see the same kind of analysis again. It's also distributable, so I can send it out. I can take a picture of I can take a screenshot of whatever it is and email it directly from inside of Business Insights Explorer. We can even access 100 screens from inside of it. So that's a nice thing. That's a nice functionality. So if you're in there and you need to check on a sales order inside the interface, you could do that. So again, we can see Explorer from the Business Insights screen here, the folder. It's also the relevant views are available in the related module listing as well. So if I look at these top three here, account view, account transactions view, and account budgets view, and I click on general ledger and down to Explore, you'll see that those three are populated there. So I could access the Explore data from inside the module. And that's useful in case you don't want to grant everyone access to Business Insights Explorer in your roles settings, and you only want to give someone access to AR, for instance. They would have the ability to just see the AR related views. So it's pretty nice. Anyway, so that stuff is available all over the system. Just like anywhere else in Sage, there's a couple different ways to get to a given functionality. So navigation, let's pivot to navigation quick. So basically, if I click on the customer view here, I'll take a second to spool up. It's very Excel-ish in some ways and kind of Access-ish in another way, if you're familiar with those tools. But it's basically the Explorer view here is set up into basically four panels. The navigation pane here to the left it holds basically pivoted information on the customer record. So we clicked on the customer view, and so we get customer in the main pane here, which we'll talk about in just a second. But these are, if you click on these previews, you get relevant, related information to the customer information. So if I click on All Tech here, and then I can see related information populated in the bottom pane, which we'll also talk about in just a second. There are additional functionalities down here. Explore allows you to drill into given customer record information in this particular case, and see related. If I click on standard here, I can click on a filter basically that shows us, in this case, open invoices per customer in a more detailed way. Get a drink of water, 1 second. And then the task section at the bottom here, that is an easy way to get to actual Sage 100 functions. So if I click on tasks here and I see, oh, All Tech, oh, let me just look at their customer record for a minute. I can click on that, and automatically the customer maintenance screen comes up, and All Tech. Note that All Tech is highlighted here. It's brought me up and populated All Tech. And I can go through just like I was in Sage 100. I am in Sage 100, just accessing the screen a different way. So that's how that works. And so the navigation pane is able to be hidden. It's, first of all, right now it's pinned outward. I can unpin it and it will close and kind of tuck itself away in the navigation pane over here. Or I can pin it and move it. So I can move it out here and gain a little bit more real estate, or I can right click and dock it back again. I typically leave it open, but if you need more real estate, just unpin it and it'll make it go away. It'll hide itself. For our purposes, if I can get it to stay open, I will pin it open. So that's the kind of the navigation grid. And again, we'll spend most of our time today on the preview grid here, showing us related information to the view that we've chosen. And we've chosen the customer view, and there are a number of different ways to look at relevant data. Excuse me. The main grid in the center here, the larger grid, and that can be made smaller, by the way, by using this line here to pull up the bottom if you wanted. So if you had a ton of detail under each customer, it might make more sense to open that wide open to see much more real estate down here available for the details of a given record that you've chosen at the top, the customer that you've chosen at the top. Generally, the main screen here holds header and master record data. Unless you've drilled in, you may even see related data like invoicing. We can look at that a little bit later on if we have time in our discussion. So there's a number of functions here in this particular section. Again, it holds master and header related records. I can also create a chart related to that data as it sits right out of the box. So I could say just customer balance, make it a bar graph, and say let's just get the current balance and group it by customer and do it by customer and sort it by customer balance. So that now I can see 8. I've put 8 data points per page. I could raise that if I wanted to in real time here and see the open balances as a graphical visual representation of the grid that I've just populated here with almost no effort. I can also group and sort from this section. So if I wanted to sort, say, by salesperson, I could grab the salesperson column and drag it up to the group by that column box here. And automatically the system will group our customers by the salesperson, by the related salesperson. To make that go away, I can just take it right back and put it right back in, and it'll put it right back where I found it. We can also sort. So I could sort by salesperson here, just like the filters do inside of Excel, and I could sort all of them up or down. I could also create a custom way of looking at those records and sorting them and filtering them. Excuse me. I also have the ability to search. Here at the top, here's a search pane that would help you search. If you had thousands of customers, it might be useful to be able to search for that, search more easily. So remember that there's a search functionality right there at the top. We can also right-click on header information. If I right-click on the header information and click on column settings, I have the ability to add fields. I can change column names. I can even open the expression builder, this calculated box here, and that will open up an expression builder. So I could come down here and grab the terms code and add the terms code to the view if I wanted to. It was excluded, so I could include that. I could exclude others. If my view was kind of bloated and I didn't need address 3, I could take that off, for instance. I also have the ability to highlight the, if I wanted the current balance column to just instead be balance, I could do that and change it and say okay, and balance then would be changed right here. It's been changed from customer balance to balance. So there's all kinds of ways to kind of change the way this looks in the main grid. The secondary grid, as I said a second ago, is the area where the related details will show up once you click on a related master record. So if I go to Patrick here, the customer I set up for myself, and I click on Memos over here, I would see the Patrick record has a bunch of collection-related memos attached to him. He needs to pay his bills. Excuse me. We have the ability in this grid down here to use the filter builder. I can also sort down here as well. So this filter builder button right over here allows me to create a filter, and sometimes a cascading layered filter that allows me to only see the kinds of related memos, in this particular case, related to Patrick Johnson that I'm looking for. So if you had a number of different memo types set up, you can search for a given type, for instance. We'll look into that a little bit later. I use that in an example of how this all works a little bit later on. So click on a master record, see the related details in the pane below. You can also drill into some of that stuff as well in some cases, depending on how you have it set up. The top grid up here at the top is very Excel-like. There are a number of shortcuts all over the place up here, and there's mouse over, so I won't go through all that. Some of the key items are this back and forward button. That's sort of like Internet Explorer. You can move back and forth, or Windows Explorer. You can go backwards from where you were, or move forward if you liked where you were before. You have the ability here to set up standard look views and custom views. So if I create a custom view and save it, it would show up here as a setting, and I could go back and retrieve that view at any time in a refreshed way. And then most of the items up here in the top, most of these icons are also available through right-click elsewhere in the system or in the menus here at the top. One thing I would point out here is the file menu here is kind of where the distribution stuff is. You can save your settings. So if I created a big honkin' customized view over here, query view over here, I could save it and go back to it, as I said a second ago. I can also email a page from here. So if I wanted to just take this entire section here and send the page by email, I could do that. Click that right here, and it would paste that in to the screen. Let's see if I can get that to come up here. Excuse me. So there it is. It's interfaced with Outlook and populated the screenshot of that into my email. So as a controller or someone who's watching this financial data, or maybe even a sales manager or something, I'm not going to save that or send it. You could take data from in here and send it out very easily. We also have full export options here, so I can export via Access, Excel, Word, whichever one is most meaningful to you, and distribute it from that module, from that program as well. So you can email right out of Excel if that's what you wanted to do. Maybe you wanted to massage the data a little bit more before you email it out. You have print preview, just like normal Word-based functionality as well. So that's kind of an overview of the of how this works. And so now it's kind of an overview of each of the panes and basically what they do. It's kind of an overview here. There's a lot of things that I've kind of left out. because, for the sake of time, but we can help you through that. And because it's a querying tool, there's limitless exploration available for this. So get in there and take a look at it. Unless you open a Sage task, you cannot modify the data from this. It's a querying tool only. So it's very handy just to go looking around and experimenting with. So we're going to do a little example here. I've chosen the customer, again, the customer view. I'll start from the beginning so that everybody gets a refresher of that. I do not want to save that. So if I go back into Business Insights Explorer and go back into Explorer, I would grab the customer view, and we're going to build a view here and try to get something meaningful out of it. Let's say that the MFG company, which is the data set we're using, in that company, we have our salespeople manage the collection process if it gets out of hand. Let's say that they get involved if it's gone too long and there's an issue, there are issues with the account, whatever it is. And our AR collection efforts, the typical channels are not working for whatever reason. There's a million things that can happen. We need to give the salespeople visibility to the customers they're assigned to, the current balance on account, or maybe like the aging buckets. Since we use the Sage 100 memo functionality in MFG to keep a record of our AR team's collection contacts and efforts, we want to show the collection call related memos in the customer record. And we want to give a visual representation of the aging situation and update the salespeople by email. So what I do is I choose the standard view setting up on top, make sure I'm in the standard view. That's a clean view with no modifications. And I choose customer memos. And you can see automatically that if I'm on an ad comp, I see a number of memos below. And if I click through, there might be memos related to all kinds of things here. So the Patrick user has some, Patrick customer has some. There's one for business microsystems. So how I would do this is that I would grab the salesperson. We're interested in grouping by salesperson. So I grab the salesperson and drag that into the column header, automatically grouping all the data by salesperson. Since the salesperson is now, since it's a grouping level, at the grouping level, it's not really relevant to the actual report anymore as a data element. So I can drag it out and make it disappear. I can put it back in fairly easily, but I don't want to show it in the details. So I'm going to get it out of there since it's already at a group setting. Then I'm going to access the filter builder down here in the lower right. And add a filter so that I see customers that have a aging one bucket balance greater than or equal to $3,000. So if I go in and grab the first data element here and I say aging one, and then I grab the modifier here, and that is greater than or equal to, and I put 3,000 and hit apply, it is automatically basically filtering everybody, all the customers, and sorting them by or grouping them by salesperson that have an aging one bucket of more than $3,000. So they're out 30 plus days and they're out more than 3,000. And note down here that we have that the system is telling us what filter is in place. And I can uncheck that box and unapply that filter and then check it again and put it right back in again. So I can just kind of check my work or see what it looks like without the filter. In this particular case, I might also want to move the phone record across, and this is common functionality in Sage and other systems. But I just basically grabbed that data element and brought it over so that whoever is going to access this would have quick access to the phone number. I don't know that I actually added the contact name here. I didn't, but let's just assume the contact name is in there so that they know who they're talking to. Okay, so now if I click on Ad Comp here, let's just say we're interested in the Ad Comp company and we want to look at that. I see a number of different memos down here. There could be hundreds of memos per se. I mean, that's conceivable for all kinds of reasons. Maybe it's a client configuration issue or other notes that you want to contain or hold in Sage about a customer. If you name your memos in the right convention, then we can sort and exclude them exclude unwanted records by clicking on the filter here and hit the custom button. And if the memo code is like, and I'll just put C in here because I've used C as a collection memo record with the date string behind it. I could say OK, and now I've basically filtered out all memos that are not collection related. So now if I'm a salesperson per se, I can come in here if I'm skillful enough at this and grab the customer I'm talking about and automatically see a summary of the collection activity against that account before I call them. It seems like a useful thing to do just so that you know the history. And so relevant to this, I could create a chart that says, let's just say salesperson aging is the name of the chart, and it's building in real time here to the right. Let's just grab current balance, aging 1, 2, and 3, and group that by salesperson. And then sort by salesperson. So now we can see what basically the aging looks like by salesperson. So you can kind of tell which salesperson whose accounts are happier, if that's a way of gauging or information we can gather from aging. So that's an interesting way of slicing and dicing the data. So if I'm also a salesperson, and AdComp is the customer, I would be interested in knowing what the invoices look like that we're trying to collect on. So if I go over here to Explore and I say Open Invoices and hit Standard, it's going to ask me if I want to save the view that I've just created. And I want to say yes to that, and I'll call it Aging and say OK to that. And I've now pivoted over to Open Invoices for that customer. So I can now see what's out there. And if I roll back, if I hit the back button, that would take me back to the view that I just created. I do lose a couple of different filtering pieces. I would have to filter this out one more time down here. But I have the ability then to just drill right back and forth and see the relevant data behind the aging. I hope that's helpful. We can also, if I go back over here, I could take this and send the page by email out to all my salespeople. So basically sending your salespeople an aging report for their customers, and it's taking its sweet time coming up here. Hopefully that will, oh, there it is, good. So now I could send this out to, I could send it out to Alan and whoever else to get this distributed properly to the right people to take action, and then they could access Business Insights Explorer themselves if they wanted to. So that's kind of like the main demo exercise that I wanted to take you through at a very high level, very easy. As you can see, there's many different ways to slice and dice this data. We didn't even touch half of the tiny percentages of Explore possibilities or any of the other preview options. I feel like from a value standpoint, it's an interesting tool, and I think I would speak for the Sage 100 team here at Oasis by saying that not many of our clients actually utilize this functionality to the extent that it can be useful. And I think maybe it's because no one really takes the chance to explore it as much as maybe they have time to, or as much as they feel comfortable doing that. So I feel like it's valuable if you feel comfortable viewing the data in this format and need the ability to slice and dice large amounts of data and pinpoint into data in real time. And I didn't mention this earlier, but the refresh button here will refresh the information on demand. So if there's active accounting going on in the background or sales, you can refresh this and get up-to-date information. It's enormously powerful for joining related data together for analysis and eventual distribution to the people who need it. I'll wrap up the webinar now. My goodness, it's been almost 50 minutes. In closing, I would say that Business Insights in general, all three pieces of functionality can be very powerful. Each component offers its own kind of specialized value, though, and it's important to understand with Explorer especially that it's very difficult to even know what the true potential of it is without getting in there and actually doing the exploring. Think about a data metric that you want, or think about what's important about your business, and then go see if you can find it, or call us and ask us for help. It's basically only a query tool, so there's no harm in setting it up and looking through everything you possibly can find, playing with filters and groupings, expressions. You'll likely discover at the end that the data comparison or analysis that might have been kind of outside your grasp or difficult to get to in Sage 100, just because of its reporting functionality or the querying screen views, it just might be easier in Business Insights Explorer after you learn it a little bit. So that's what I have for today. I am really grateful that you all stopped your day and took the time to spend with us. Give us a call if we can ever help you. Pam, I would pivot back to you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any additional questions that pop up after this webinar, if you will email those to me at pam@oasisky.com, we'll be glad to get those answered for you. If you would like some additional training or one of our consultants to give you a call and spend some more time and actually help you create some reports for your dashboard or through Explorer, just give us a call, and again, we'll be glad to help you with that. And one final thing, just a reminder that we are having our Sage 100 end user group meeting in Louisville next week on Thursday the 17th. If you have not yet signed up, please do so. And if you, for whatever reason, did not receive an email about this event, just let me know, and I'll make sure that we get a registration email over to you. So thank you all very much, and we appreciate your time. Thanks.